Elite figures in the world of academia and big law are starting to face consequences for their newly revealed associations with Jeffrey Epstein. In the Epstein files, there are tons of communications spanning years with professors, administrative members of universities, lawyers, and so on and so forth. Many of these people have expressed regret that they were associated with Epstein, but some of them have actually defended their behavior even when they were suggesting young women for Epstein to work with. Jeffrey Epstein was friendly with powerful people around the globe and across numerous disciplines. We know that he was close with former US President Bill Clinton and sitting US President Donald Trump. We know that he was friendly with tech billionaires like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. He was also friendly with professors, lawyers, and people who interface with all types of vulnerable women, including students. Now, Inside Higher Ed is reporting that some of these professors named in the Epstein files are starting to face some consequences. Just this week, Inside Higher Ed reports that university officials removed the profile for Mark Tramo, an associate adjunct professor of neurology at UCLA. This was after a petition to fire the professor gained over 7,800 signatures on change.org. And within this petition, there are mentions of various Epstein files concerning this professor, as well as some background about why the petitioner finds him dangerous in his current capacity. It leads with this screenshot of an email chain between Mark Tramo and Jeffrey Epstein from 2010. And as we've come to expect from the Epstein files, a lot of the redactions in this email seem to protect perpetrators more so than the students themselves. For example, we can see that there are students reaching out to Mark Tramo looking for internship opportunities. For example, in these emails, we can see that some of these students were looking for research opportunities, and Mark Tramo actually forwarded them to Jeffrey Epstein, who responded, "Are either of these cute?" Now, Tramo claimed in a statement that he shared with local news outlet KTLA that he was not aware of Epstein's quote horrible crimes until after his 2019 arrest. But as we can see in this email from 2010, the professor was more than aware of the type of person that Jeffrey Epstein was. Almost a decade before he was arrested, he was weighing considerations for these students based on their physical appearance. That might not reveal the extent of his crimes, but what it does reveal is his misogyny. And that's something that his associates clearly knew about for years and did not have a problem with, which is the very basis of the problem itself. When we tolerate misogyny, we create a pathway for people to escalate how violent that misogyny becomes. So these professors can't claim ignorance when they were well aware of the type of person who Jeffrey Epstein was, and they actually put students in harm's way by continuing these relationships with him, by continuing to grant him access to these spaces where vulnerable young women were studying. And that's actually against the Title IX policies that demand schools and universities have gender equality on campus. Now, this petitioner goes on to say, "I've been a proud Bruin, which is the school's mascot, since 2010, and I'm outraged by UCLA's handling of Mark Trauma." They note that he forwarded students' information to Epstein, continued to send information about students to Epstein after Epstein responded inappropriately, BCC'd Epstein on emails to and about his students and classes, and four, was at the beck and call of a monster. I've now read almost all of the 1,000 plus mentions of Mark Tramo in the Epstein files. I have a decent understanding of the relationship between Tramo and Epstein. Epstein was a narcissist who collected academics like trophies because they lent credibility to his quote philanthropy. He used the reputation of esteemed institutions to make himself sound trustworthy. Every academic who thought they were benefiting from a friendship was used as a stepping stone, an anecdote at cocktail parties, and a way to boost his own ego. Epstein threw in just enough pseudo intellectual buzzwords and funding that these academics convinced themselves that he was legitimate. He slowly tested the waters of their morality, pushing boundaries of inappropriateness to see what he could get away with, and pursuing relationships with the men who never said no to him. Tramo bent over backwards to appease him. It's actually gross to see the ease with which he code switches, mirroring his language after Epstein. He uses correct grammar and punctuation when emailing people who can benefit him, but he sinks to the level of copying Epstein's misspellings as soon as Epstein makes them. He ends his emails to Epstein with XXX kisses. Whether it was a patient appointment, a meeting with his peers, or his mother's funeral, Trauma was willing to deprioritize other people to optimize his Jeffrey time. In a September 2025 email to Harvard, Trauma claimed that he didn't know about Epstein's offenses. If that's true, he must have felt very confused when, in their 20 plus years of friendship, their NYC meetings with academics were joined by a girl/woman from a seemingly endless roster. Trauma has lost all credibility and authority to practice as a physician or work as a professor. How are students or patients expected to feel safe with him, knowing that he's willing to auction off their information to the highest bidder? How can he ever be trusted? Whether Mark Trauma will actually be removed from his position at UCLA or if it's just his website profile that's been taken down is yet to be determined. But he isn't the only academic who had this type of relationship with Epstein for years and is trying to backtrack now. Inside Higher Ed reports, Duke University officials announced last week it had closed 3 research centers, including the Center for Advanced Hindsight, run by business professor Dan Ariely, who is named hundreds of times in the Epstein files. Now, Dan Ariely, a few days ago, published an op ed in the student paper The Chronicle detailing his connection with Jeffrey Epstein and defending himself. He wrote, "I also encountered Epstein briefly at a professional conference, but did not have a substantive interaction there. While attending the conference, I sat near somebody who I believed was his colleague and had a short conversation with her that I found intellectually interesting. Afterward, I emailed Epstein asking if he could put me in touch with her so we could continue that discussion. In that email, I described her as very, very smart and mentioned that she was a redhead as a physical detail solely to help identify who I meant because I did not know her name. To the best of my memory, that introduction did not occur, nor did I ever meet her again." Again, we have a pattern emerging here in the correspondences between these academics and Epstein. They are hyperfixating on young women's appearances. And even if this mention of a redheaded woman's appearance is as innocent as Ariely claims, there's another example of this that is far more egregious, and the professor behind it is standing strong in his belief that he did nothing wrong. The Nation reports that over at Yale, this professor, David Gelernter, is defending his communications with Jeffrey Epstein, despite how egregious they are. The article continues on to say that at Yale, Gelernter is best known for being the worst ranked professor in the university's computer science department. Nationally, he's known for being a contrarian in academia and clashing against scientific consensus on climate change. For that role, he met with Donald Trump in 2017 and was floated as a potential science advisor during Trump's first term. Not a coincidence that this man is connected to Donald Trump, who is also one of the main characters in the Epstein files. But within these new files, this professor corresponded with Epstein dozens of times between 2009 and 2015. The Nation reports in 2010, Gelernter invited Epstein to New Haven, even offering the hospital's heliport for his helicopter to land. In April 2011, Gelernter seemingly solicited money and advice from Epstein for a business venture, discussing operating budgets and development costs, including executive salaries, for himself and 2 others. So he's looking to profit off of this relationship handsomely. In another email released in late January, Gelernter recommended one of his female students to Epstein for an unspecified job. On October 11th, 2011, 3 years after Epstein's conviction in Florida for soliciting prostitution from a minor, Gelernter wrote, "I have a perfect editoress in mind. Yale senior, worked at Vogue last summer, runs her own campus mag, art major, completely connected, very small, good looking, blonde." Gelernter has actually defended this vehemently in the weeks since. He said, "Students who are bored enough to spend their time demonstrating against the use of descriptions in private correspondence have got this whole Yale thing wrong. Is that why you came to Yale?" He even said he was very glad to have written this note. And according to Inside Higher Ed, he's been temporarily removed from the classroom. Hopefully, a fuller investigation will show that this man is in no position to be teaching young, vulnerable female students. It's honestly disgusting and horrifying that he's still defending talking to Jeffrey Epstein about young women this way, or that he thinks it's appropriate to ever talk about a female student this way. Again, we have laws like Title IX that are supposed to prevent this type of behavior because it's inherently unequal based on a student's gender. Galanter's email is a perfect example of gendered discrepancies because he describes this student as an editoress, which is a distinction between a male editor and a female editor. And then he then goes on to say that she's a very small, good looking blonde, which is not the way that male professors typically describe male students. As a Yale senior, this young woman was probably 21 or 22 years old, and this professor is literally putting her directly in harm's way and doing so by talking about her appearance. Young women on college campuses are not safe. College campuses are the sites of so much sexual abuse and violence toward women, and this is a perfect example of why that continues to happen. It's because of the way that young women are treated based on their appearances and the way that male figures of authority in their lives put them in danger by offering them up to predators. Even though Jeffrey Epstein is dead, the danger for women to be sexually preyed on is still looming large. And with other men like this running around in positions of power over young, vulnerable women, it's clear to see why that danger is ever present. There needs to be more done to ensure that college campuses are safe places for female students in line with our existing laws, which have time and time again been neglected in favor of protecting perpetrators and misogyny. And here's another way that female students have been involved with the Jeffrey Epstein case. At Columbia's College of Dental Medicine, officials have been removed over ties to Jeffrey Epstein in an apparent scheme to get his one-time girlfriend enrolled as a student there after her application was previously denied. The Columbia Spectator student publication reports that the College of Dental Medicine has taken action against two officials who maintained relationships with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. These administrators helped a young woman who Jeffrey referred to as his girlfriend gain admission to the college in 2012 after she was initially rejected. On August 16th, 2012, 3 months after his girlfriend was admitted to the school, Epstein advanced $100,000 to a fund named after Ira Lamster, then dean of the College of Dental Medicine. Lamster served as dean from 2001 to 2012. This dean left the university voluntarily in 2017. In a statement that this former dean provided to The Spectator, he said, "At that time, we were pursuing a major gift from Jeffrey Epstein, and it was logical to agree to Jeffrey Epstein's request." But young women are not bargaining chips so that schools and universities can get big donations from donors who had been convicted for sex offenses involving minors. This whole system is so clearly corrupt, and it puts young women everywhere in danger. How are young women supposed to trust that these campuses are safe places for them to learn and thrive? The unfortunate reality is that as long as these types of people are employed there in the classroom, they aren't. But universities and Ivy League campuses aren't the only places affected by the fallout of the Epstein files. NBC News reported that Kathleen Rumner, a top Goldman Sachs lawyer, will be leaving the firm because of what was discovered in the Epstein files concerning her relationship with him. Kathy Rumler wasn't just a notable criminal defense attorney. According to NBC News, she was the top lawyer at Goldman Sachs. But in the Epstein files, Rumler exchanged dozens of friendly notes with Epstein for years, including after he was convicted. In 2015, Epstein requested legal advice from her, and she wrote, "Well, I adore him. It's like having another older brother." But that's not the only reason she was helping Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein's longtime assistant wrote in an email in 2016, "Confirm for Hermes bag for Kathy." They were giving her expensive luxury items as gifts in exchange for her services. Other emails show her referring to Epstein as "sweetie" and "Uncle Jeffrey." At one point, she was even listed as a backup executor on Epstein's will, although she never served in any executor role. Her name was removed before Epstein died in prison. She maintains that she was friendly with Epstein only in the context of being a criminal defense attorney and said she regrets ever having known him. I wonder if she still has the Hermes bag in her closet. NBC reports that Rumler is the latest in a wave of high-profile people leaving key business and government roles because of the Epstein files. On February 4th, Brad Karp, the chairman of the law firm Paul Weiss, stepped back from that position after it was shown that he too had been emailing Epstein for years. Then Morgan McSweeney, chief of staff to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, resigned because of the fallout from his having recommended that Starmer appoint Peter Mandelson as the UK ambassador to the US. Mandelson appears repeatedly in the Epstein files, and he was fired as the UK envoy to the US in September over other Epstein related revelations. So, what does all of this show us? First of all, it shows that these high profile institutions are taking steps to at least make it appear that they're doing something about all of these figures who were connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The real test will be whether these professors and lawyers end up getting new positions and new jobs. And most importantly, if they'll be in a position to work with students directly, following these clear signs that they were willing to put them in unsafe conditions just to continue their friendship or partnership or whatever gains they were receiving from Jeffrey Epstein. It also goes to show that both men and women in these powerful positions have no problem buddying up with people accused and even convicted of heinous crimes as long as they continue to personally benefit from that. That is the culture within a lot of these institutions. And it's a culture that's not going to go away overnight just because of these Epstein files revelations. It's a culture that needs to be stamped out through accountability because none of these people are going to learn any other way. Tons of communities around the world have had to face a reckoning because of the powerful people in the Epstein files. That reckoning is a good thing because the systemic rot was always there. Now we're just pulling back the curtain. But what's so important is that these student reporters and beat journalists continue to follow up and ensure that these accountability measures aren't just temporary or symbolic, and that these people really are removed from power so that they don't hurt anyone else.